All right, now let's bring you up to speed to this story in the U.S. Texas Governor Greg Abbott was accused of failing to address gun control issues in his state after he blamed the tragic elementary school shooting on the gunman's mental health at a news conference. 19 kids and 2 teachers were shot and killed inside a 4th grade classroom at a Robb Elementary School in Uvalde just 2 days before the summer break. Now, another 17 people were injured in the shooting, and their injuries are not life-threatening, Abbott said at the news conference. The gunman, a local high school student identified as Salvador Ramos, had shared his plan on Facebook minutes before the attack. He was killed by a border patrol officer on the scene. Now, let's get the very latest. We cross to our correspondent, Sherwin Bryce-Pease. Sherwin, thank you so much again for your time. Now, Sherwin, we understand that the bodies of the victims will start being released today. Give us the latest information we have, but in the context that we are still have more questions than answers some 48 hours after this incident. Isn't that correct? I mean, paint a picture for us.
Yeah, I mean, the last 2 mass shootings in the United States, Unati, Buffalo 12 days ago, you got a pretty quick sense of what the motive was behind this attack. There was an online manifesto, as we discussed yesterday. We still don't know why this deceased perpetrator committed this horrific crime in Uvalde, Texas. We know that it started as a domestic dispute. He shot his grandmother, his 66-year-old grandmother, in the face, who we understand is in a critical but stable condition. So her perspective, once investigators are able to talk to her, if and when that is possible, that might begin to paint a picture here, because they cannot interrogate him because he's dead, right? He was shot by those border patrol agents. We don't have the motive, right? And so what we're trying to do is piece together bit by bit, day by day, hour by hour here, what transpired. So let me paint you a picture. This gunman was able to purchase 2 assault rifles, AR-15 rifles, for his 18th birthday, right? It's legal to purchase weapons in the United States from the age of 18. He also purchased 375 rounds of ammunition. 375 rounds of ammunition. This was someone that was going to war. He encountered an armed resource officer. There was an armed police officer at the school that he encountered as he entered the school premises before he barricaded himself in a classroom where most of his victims succumbed to gunshot wounds. Why was there not an engagement with that armed resource officer? Were there shots fired? We still don't have the answers as to why he was able then, after encountering that officer, was able to then go into a classroom. He then barricades himself inside this classroom where most of the victims perish. Reports that the gunman was in that classroom for up to an hour has really set off alarm bells, particularly in the Uvalde community. We understand, Unati, that parents arrived while this gun massacre was underway. They were standing outside, blocked from entering the school by police, frustrated. There's a testimony, an interview from one of the parents who talks about how his daughter was inside. They heard gunshots. They were urging police to go in, but the police did not go in immediately. They feel that there was a timeline there, a window period where they might have rushed the gunman, gone in, but they didn't do that. So a lot of questions as to why this process unfolded so slowly. We understand that the first 911 calls happened at about 11:30 a.m. that morning, and the gunman was only taken down at around 1 p.m. So what happened in those 90 minutes, right? A lot of questions as to the timeline here and the resistance, the reluctance, perhaps, if you will, of police to rush the gunman, go into the school and take him down. This was Governor Abbott talking about what they knew at a press conference late yesterday. Let's watch.
The gunman was 18 years old and reportedly a high school dropout. Reportedly, there has been no criminal history identified yet. He may have had a juvenile record, but that is yet to be determined. There was no known mental health history of the gunman. He used one weapon, which was an AR-15, using 223 rounds. There was no meaningful forewarning of this crime other than what I'm about to tell you. As of this time, the only information that was known in advance was posted by the gunman on Facebook approximately 30 minutes before reaching the school. The first post was to the point of, he said, "I'm going to shoot my grandmother." The second post was, "I shot my grandmother." The third post, maybe less than 15 minutes before arriving at the school, was, "I'm going to shoot an elementary school."
So the official narrative right now is that the police didn't have that much time in terms of online posts or any indications that would point to the destructive behavior of this deceased gunman. We are also, the stories, the trauma, Onati, of this incident. You hear from teachers that immediately implemented safety drills when they started hearing gunshots in the school, locking her classroom door. She talks about how she told her children to get under their desks. And remember, these are grade 4s. And while they heard the screams and the gunshots down the corridor, she talks about how the children huddled under their desks started to cry, and she motioned to these children to come closer to them so that she could hold them and hug them as police outside started breaking windows of these classrooms so that the children could exit through these classrooms. There's a lot of trauma in this community. Those bodies are now going to be released today to mortuaries and to parents and families. There was a vigil held in the area last night. This is a slow process of healing, but a lot of pain, certainly from parents, grandparents, and a community of 15,000 that is very closely knit, and everybody in some way connected to this school, or certainly this incident, no less, the fact that Americans around the United States are feeling this tragedy, certainly still today, Onati.
Certainly very, very tragic. Now, Sherwin, we again see these two narratives emerging between the two major parties. From the Democrats, the need for greater gun control legislation at the federal level, and from Republicans, that this is about the need for more good people with guns, including armed guards stationed on school campus. What does that conversation look like from your end?
Yeah, there was an interesting moment during that press conference with the governor yesterday when Beto O'Rourke, the Democratic candidate for governor, who's running in the midterm elections in November, interrupted the governor's press conference to say that he was doing nothing. They're very pro-gun access in a state like Texas, and he referred to previous mass shootings in that state, the El Paso shooting, I believe that was in 2019, the Santa Fe shooting in 2018, and he basically pointed his finger at the governor saying, "You are not doing anything here." So Democrats want federal gun control legislation, a common sense gun legislation to be passed. That's very difficult in a very divided United States Senate. And Republicans, on the other hand, are focusing on other issues that they believe point to why this might have happened, including the issue of mental health, something Governor Greg Abbott spoke about yesterday. This is what he had to say.
Before coming out here, we had a long discussion with law enforcement at all levels. We had a discussion with community leaders, elected officials. And I asked the sheriff and others an open-ended question and got the same answer from the sheriff as well as from the mayor of Uvalde. The question was, what is the problem here? And they were straightforward and emphatic. They said, we have a problem with mental health illness in this community. And then they elaborated on the magnitude of the mental health challenges that they are facing in the community and the need for more mental health support in this region.
So So the counter-argument to that is that other countries also face mental health issues, and you don't see the level of gun violence or mass shootings on the scale that you do in the United States. And let me just give you some important figures here. In the United States, they have the highest rate of gun ownership in the world, Unati. 120 guns for every 100 citizens. There are more guns in the United States than cars in the United States. So while there might be a mental health issue here, there is clearly also a proliferation of guns issue in the United States today.
Absolutely, Sherwin. Sherwin, I want to just squeeze in the final question from my end, just listening to some of those clips and also, some of your updates. One can certainly see that there's less and less hope for tighter U.S. gun laws, from an American's perspective. I mean, this latest incident happened just 10 days before that other Buffalo incident that we saw in New York, where 10 elderly people, black people, were killed. So there is this, feeling of hopelessness coming out from the Americans. But I'm also getting a sense that some of them are still thinking that the buck really does stop with U.S. President Joe Biden. But essentially, it's actually Congress. They should be the ones that are shifting some of these laws.
I mean, as we touched on yesterday, Unati, there is legislation that has already passed the Democratic House of Representatives, legislation that would deal with the gun show loophole, closing the ability of people that go to gun shows or make private purchases, whether online or in person, closing that loophole that says you must have a background check for all gun sales in the United States. There's a separate bill that has also passed the House that essentially makes it mandatory for background checks to happen within a 3-week period, as opposed to if it doesn't happen within 3 days, the gun sale can go ahead. So very common sense legislation that is already on the books. It's stuck in the Senate, and it's stuck there, and it cannot make its way to President Joe Biden's desk for signature to become law in the United States. Democrats are certainly from this White House have pushed for greater gun legislation. The problem here is the United States Senate is evenly split. You need 10 Republicans to join the 50 Democrats to pass major legislation in this country. And unfortunately, that is not going to happen in the short term. The other issue here that we need to consider is you talk about the hopelessness. This might actually spur some hope in a sense that we are moving into a midterm election. And given the fact that these were young babies, these were young children that died, this touches at the core of America. This touches at the core of an individual's soul. And so maybe, just maybe, this might spur some change as we move into the midterm elections in November.
Sherwin Bryce-Pease, thank you so much for that update. Very crucial information coming out of that story. Thank you so much. All right, let's continue here now. President Cyril Ramaphosa says he has addressed a range of issues, including the urgent need to address climate change. With a group of senior public figures known as the Elders, the president hosted the group, which comprised former Irish President Mary Robinson and former South African First Lady Gracia Machel in Pretoria. Ramaphosa says the just transition to a greener, more sustainable future in South Africa was discussed with the group. The president says the Elders stress the need for the transformation of the economy to benefit poor people and address the inequality situation in South Africa.